Pacers owner Herb Simon meets with reporters for the first time in a very long time to discuss the state of the Pacers, the direction of this franchise, and much more. Scott Agness from Fieldhouse Files, who was there with me and a few other reporters talking to the Pacers owner. We're going to talk about that whole conversation and our takeaways from it inside that meeting room. And then the Pacers, a couple hours after that meeting, go to Milwaukee, play the Giannis Bucks, and get absolutely smoked. Got to break down a terrible Pacers loss as well on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to this Thursday edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers as always. My name's Tony East. I cover the team for the West Side Community News and Forbes. And boy, oh boy, was it a crazy day in Pacerland. They made a move, and it's going to be like the sixth biggest story of the day because Herb Simon spoke to reporters for the first time in a long time. In fact, so long that I've been on this beat since the end of their playoff series against the Cavs in 2016-17, and I have never spoken to Herb Simon, ever. So it was a crazy day. 5 reporters in the room with him for 45 minutes, so lots to talk to about that. And then the Pacers went out right after Herb Simon talked about liking his team and got absolutely decimated by the Bucks without Giannis, without Chris Middleton. It was a really strange day in Pacerland, and joining me to talk about that 45-minute meeting, one of the only other people in the room, Scott Agness from Fieldhouse Files, been on the beat for a while and has talked to Herb Simon before me. Scott, what a day it's been.
Yeah, absolutely, Tony. Good to be on with you, but there's so much to take away, I think, from that long conversation, right?
Agreed. I think that, well, I honestly, beyond the takeaway specifically, I think the fact that the conversation was had at all is a big part of the story that Herb Simon felt like he needed to tell the story in his way because of the way things were going for this team.
Yeah, I would completely agree. And that's kind of what I was hinting at, or really said in my story, is it was time for ownership to take ownership of the situation. Because for so long, and it's not specific to what has transpired in the last week, it's everything that goes back to signing a restricted free agent Malcolm Brogdon and hearing the Bucks side of things, plus then additional reporting, and then all the different other things, basically in the last decade at least. And that's been my time on the beat. It's been very limited. I think I had one on the record conversation with him, and that was it. I think the last on the record conversation he's done with local reporters is one I can remember. Probably about the time you came on the beat, I think it was 2016. So contrast that with some of the more outspoken leaders in the NBA, Mark Cuban, Joe Lacob, were the first two that came to mind for me. There's many others. There's been someone like Jeannie Buss, who felt like 2 years ago did every single podcast that wanted her. Or take it local, Tony, and Colts with Jim Irsay. I'm pretty sure he talks after almost every Colts game, at least every Colts win. And I'm not saying he needs to do any of that, but honestly, I almost feel like it should be pretty much a requirement, essentially, for an owner like this to talk twice a year. I don't think that's asking very much, just in terms of your thoughts on the team, the direction of the team, maybe why you made a coaching change or why you hired a new president or GM if that happens. So I thought that was important.
Yeah, that's something I always try to bring up and remind people sometimes around the times of lots of trade and free agent speculation, is that, yes, and we'll get to actually Kevin Pritchard having a lot of autonomy in his job, but yes, Kevin Pritchard's job is to build a winner, but he also works for Herb Simon, and Herb Simon is his boss, right? Like, it's not just like he's going out every day and going, how do I build a championship contender? He has a list of, parameters that it has to be within, or a list, whatever. He works for someone, and that is always important. And we met with the someone today who has no one telling him what to do, no gears being pulled. He is the decision maker. That's why it's so critical. And for those unaware at this point, Scott's story's already up. Greg Doyle's story's up. I think Kravitz's story's up. Mine is not yet because I'm obviously the slowest of the group in terms of actually putting thoughts on paper. But
I think you have a few things to do otherwise, too.
Yes, that's true. The reason this was called, or at least the reason Herb said he called this in, was because his name has been printed in reports that said he was thinking a certain way, and he didn't feel like he thought that way. And I mean, it's not that hard to figure out. He's referring to the
Yeah.
Athletic story that says
But
Herb.
by the way, Tony, don't you love the like old guy thing? And I don't just mean Herb here. I mean like even my dad. Anything that's written, it's the paper. I read that in the
Yeah,
paper. And it might be on Twitter and it might be on online, but I read that in the paper. Sorry, I always get a kick out of that.
yeah. Herb called the Athletic the paper, which ironically they talked about destroying the paper in their mission statement when they were founded, which makes it even funnier. So yeah, that's what he brought us in for, and he, very publicly on the record, didn't shy away from saying maybe we'll make moves if that's what this comes to or that's how this goes, but was like, no, we're not thinking rebuild, and that's the guy to hear that from. So were you surprised at all to hear that from him? I mean, I think we've kind of figured out between the lines that rebuild is not necessarily the right word for the Pacers anyway, but for him to come out so strongly on that was pretty surprising to me.
I was not surprised because it's more geared towards that last point, Tony. I think when I and others read that original story and tried to learn more, I was like, I've heard nothing about what I think of as a rebuild or some to the far extreme is tanking. You're never gonna teams can't talk about that or mention that. And generally, that's a harsh thing that very few teams have done. That's talking about the 76ers, right? And that was 4 or 5 years. That would never be functional. I don't even think a true rebuild of tearing it all apart would ever even be functional here. But when I read that and I looked back at that story and it essentially pointed to that. And so that I think through the 41-minute conversation was the gist of what Herb was trying to show here is, hey, look, I can't tolerate this. In fact, I'm embarrassed if people even mention my name with this. He almost took offense that his name and a huge rebuild was in the same vein because he would never do that. And I liked his thought here is he was like, look, I don't want to watch that basketball. So why should you pay for it? So that's what I think he got out of it and what he was trying to push. But obviously there were several other key talking points with us as well.
Yeah, that my headline is the follow-up talking point he made. And the words he said were, we're not rebuilding, we're building on the go. And that's
on the
not
go. Yep.
build on the go is the words he used. And I'm kind of trying to figure out what that means in the context of what we know about the Pacers right now. But to me, that interpretation is he still wants to kind of see what's going to happen over the next month or so. They got walloped about 6 hours after he did this call. The Bucks completely embarrassed them without Giannis or Chris Middleton. But that's what he kind of wants, and that's what he's always wanted. We know that about Herb Simon. He likes his teams to be competitive. He said this to us, right? He likes to watch his team every night be good and trying to win. And this is where the rubber meets the road with fans. Is there's a point where like that's okay when you're the Nate McMillan teams that are winning 48 games and try really hard every night and are drawing a crowd and are fun and have Vic. That's not as much okay in a season like this. And last year, when you go 34 and 38, and now you're 12 and 18, and you're not drawing a crowd, and you're not winning that much, and you're not putting your foot down 100% every night. That is not what he's saying he wants as a team. Despite, well, let me rephrase that. That's not the team he says he wants to watch every night, which is where kind of the fan and him have a break in the thoughts.
Yeah, and the other takeaways in all this was just how seemingly he came across unconcerned with some of the big issues, like mostly unaware of or really didn't have a good handle, maybe the better way of put it, of the concern with local TV issues and the fact that I'm curious now. I don't know if he reads my work, but he mentioned the 15% number, and I put that out there last week. So I'm curious, or maybe we're just getting it from the same person. But the fact that roughly 15% of people can't stream Pacer games. I know I can't without a hookup through the NBA and getting the league pass and such. And so otherwise, I got YouTube TV. I'd be one of those. I can't get Comcast. All that's restricted even in my building. That was very concerning. We had to inform him about what Mark Cuban did there. And I'm actually surprised Cuban hadn't sent out, basically, he's a great emailer. I'm surprised he hadn't sent out whatever a mass email to his other owners about it either working or not. Don't follow my lead, that type of thing. So there was that. And then kind of the striking one to me, Tony, and I'm sure it was for you as well, is how he was misguided, in my opinion, in his thought about free agency. Even his president and general manager have talked about, hey, look, we got to work on the edges. We got to hit on the draft, and we got to maximize what we can do via trades because we don't attract top free agents. They have tried, and they've been unsuccessful, and yet he believes they could attract like an all NBA caliber player. As long as like climate's not a factor, is basically what he was saying. That was the only thing that I was like, oh, watch yourself. I think you're totally wrong here.
Yeah, to the TV thing, I mean, those were surprising answers as well. That the Cuban thing, he hadn't even heard of it before, right?
Yeah.
And you asked about the Brogdon trade and his conversations with Bucks ownership, right? And not to get too into the weeds on that specific part of the conversation, but that part does show to me he talks with other owners, right? Like, so they do have those lines of communication. So the fact that this Cuban thing, where for those unaware, he spent like $3 million, a little more than that, to get Mavs fans access or a cheaper deal to stream Mavs games via Valley Sports Southwest. I forget what theirs is called,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
that's
Basically, he's paying $50 per anyone that signs up to watch
right.
Mavs games, up to 10,000.
He wants people to watch the Mavs. That I think as an owner, that's a good investment to have people watch the team that you own. So
Tony, it's marketing. That's what it is.
Yeah. So that's why he did it. Herb had never heard of it before. That was surprising to me, especially as he talked about the Warriors game Monday night, how he was not thrilled that there were a ton of Warriors fans in the building. But Greg Doyle.
Did you notice? Sorry to interrupt, but
the
lines keep coming to me.
Me too.
But as long as they're paying customers, I'm happy. That's what he said.
Yes, it is. Hey guys, quick little break here to talk to you about the good folks over at PrizePicks you've been hearing me talk about for months. Have you signed up yet? Because PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. They have the best NBA DFS prop game on the market. They offer more NBA props than any other DFS prop operator and offer all the superstar players as well as bench players, only recording a handful of minutes each game. They offer any prop you can think of: assists, rebounds, made threes. You got it. They've got it. And all the users that deposit and use our promo code will receive a 100% instant match deposit up to $100. Just be sure to use the promo code NBA when you sign up. They allow mixed sport entries. They have an award-winning app on the App Store and Google Play. You can make your entries quick, and they're safe and offer fast withdrawals. So go check them out. PrizePicks.com. Use that promo code NBA today on your App Store. Download the app. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. To the point about the stars, Greg Doyle, not mid-answer, I guess. No one interrupted him, but immediately pushed back and said, I don't know if, I think Herb's exact words were like top 3 guys or the top 4 guys in the league is like the cutoff of where he thinks they can't get someone, which is hilarious just because of what we know of the NBA and the Pacers. And Greg pushed back and was like, I don't know about that. And, to be fair, we don't have like a ton of evidence in the last like decade of a time that they've had a bunch of cap space and the stars have been available to know exactly how those conversations will go. But we have a pretty damn good idea given what players like, the landscape of the league in general, who's picked Indiana in the past before, like Brogdon and David West are their 2 best free agents ever, probably. Like it's pretty crazy. So I was stunned how far off that was. And from what I feel like reality is, and he obviously has more information than me. I'm not going to be like, this idiot, what is he talking about? He owns the team. Like he has more information than me. He knows the conversations better than me. But that was surprising to me from what I know of players and how the league has kind of generally worked. And the Pacers have never been able to attract that kind of guy. And their records of the last, basically since they traded Paul George, kind of shows it.
Yeah, I've never heard from a player or agent say, man, I can't believe it. He wanted to come to Indiana and we didn't even get a phone call. Like
right.
the one kind of exception, but it's a whole different ball game because he was under contract with the Celtics, is Gordon Hayward wanted to come here. He was waving the red flag. Hey, look, I'm over here. Look, trade for me. I promise I want to be here. Danny Ainge wouldn't let that happen, essentially. Other than that, no other name comes to mind of a guy that wanted an interview or wanted to see the place or anything like that. So the opportunities have not been there.
I agree with that. And to the point about free agents in general, there is actually one thing he said that I don't think fans think about that much with regards to spending and the tax. First of all, they couldn't have spent more money than they did at all this year anyway. I'm not going to get into CBA crap. I just get annoyed by some stupid talking points. But something that
he doesn't spend. You know this. He doesn't spend, so they say. And like you're saying, it's not true or accurate whatsoever.
Yeah, well, he did. He spent on Carlisle. He has a new stadium. He's got the new complex. I don't know what the right word is. The stuff going next to the arena, the ice skating rink, and all the vendors and stuff. I don't know what the perfect word is. The practice facility is nice as hell, as you all put. And I think you and Greg put it in your story about like the glimmer of the new carpets. Like it looks futuristic. That it's really nice in there, right? Like he does.
I said how it was still sparkling, but boy, that was privately financed, and I forget off the top of my head how much, but of the renovations, most of that was the city kicking in. But yes, he did
Yeah.
put a little bit in there. So it does deserve some notoriety. Where I've been told they're cheap is in other ways. And with family, with food, with travel, those sort of things kind of feels like they're flying Spirit Airlines, not Delta first class over here. And that's what is more concerning. Not that they won't, spend to the cap, because clearly they're almost exclusively over the cap every single year.
Yeah, they are. My cap sheet I keep every year, like as a tab saved in my Excel, and they've been over every year since I started doing that.
Yeah.
The thing about that kind of spending, and he's right, he does spend money on those things, and it does sort of attract players. And like they talk about how nice the practice facility is, fans don't care. They don't see it. They're not there, right? They only care about the games and the wins, right?
By the way, neither do players anymore.
Yeah.
Essentially, all those superstars, whatever happened to visits, right? Instead, 2 minutes after the free agency talking period starts, ex-players reached agreement with the team.
2 minutes.
Those visits are gone now.
It's like 2
So
seconds.
it doesn't really matter. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying. But that used to be a thing. Hey,
Right.
let's show them around the practice facility, take them out to St. Elmo's. That doesn't happen anymore. Most guys, quite honestly, even guys on the edges like we talk about right now, they're just taking the best deal possible.
Yeah, it's fascinating how much it's changed. Like we're only like 3 or 4 years removed from them trapping DeAndre Jordan in the house during his meeting tour when he went to
that was
Dallas and
peak
stuff.
NBA Twitter right there.
That was
That in the locker room incident out in the Staples Center, going through the
tunnels.
the back door. Yeah. That was legendary. And then guess what? The first time I was back at Staples Center, I found that door, and I was like, shit, this is awesome.
I should have found it. I've actually never been in Staples before. That's a
and
need
now
to
it's
go.
no longer Staples Center.
That's true. Wait, doesn't it not change to the? I'm not even gonna pretend like I know what the crypto stadium is.
Crypto.com, right?
Isn't it Christmas though when it changes? Maybe I'm wrong.
They took down the signage though.
No, emblematic. What else stood out to you about this? I mean, we talked for 41 minutes, and a lot of our themes were the same, or like we went back to stuff we talked about earlier. My questions that I wrote down specifically that I wanted to ask were, where do you feel like the team is headed? Like, do you like the direction? And that was like, all of our questions were kind of adjacent to that. And my second one I thought was important was, what's your relationship with Kevin like? And I thought that, and the way he talked about Kevin in general, Kevin Pritchard, I should have said his full name, was pretty telling about, and this is actually a strength of him as an owner, I think, is that he is more hands-off, right? He talked about how, like in business, you hire a lawyer to do law things, right? They went to law school. They know legal stuff. I hire Kevin Pritchard because he knows basketball things, right? He used to be a coach and a player. He knows basketball stuff. He knows people, right? He is pretty hands-off as an owner in general, not as much as he used to be, but he's pretty hands-off as an owner. And he said he still has a lot of trust in KP. And I didn't even know this. The breaking news from Fieldhouse Files today, Kevin Pritchard got an extension this past summer. I did not know that. So it seems like his relationship with Pritchard is strong, which is important because you have to kind of have that trust in your guy if you are going to change directions or build on the go as the season progresses.
There you go. Now we'll have to add that to the lexicon, like the 3 T's and all those different things. Yeah. Disagree, agree, and unite, and like all those different variables. There's only a couple things that I think he admittedly completely dodged, and one of them was when I asked him about team culture and identity. And maybe he's just unaware, he's not informed about that, but to me, that's one of the biggest issues right now is they lack a team identity, and I don't think the culture has been where it needs to be. And a lot of that, quite honestly, in my opinion, is because the changing of the guard and the fact that Donnie, who he loves, gone. Larry, who he loves, basically gone. I use Dan Burke. Maybe I'm a little biased towards him. I was around him for 20 years. I know what kind of impact he has. He's gone. Who's left? Peter Dinwiddie. Pushed out, gone. I don't know who is left from that successful era. So that's what I was getting at there, and he didn't get too much into that. And I also thought, I think it was you who asked a good question I was hoping for more details on, was the impact specifically in terms of the pandemic. He could have even mentioned, hey, look, because of that, the renovations were pushed up. That's a good thing. But would have also liked for him to mention, challenges with attendance or challenges with the business side of things. And I get it. There's a lot of things either you don't want to address or you don't want to push off within a message, right? And part of today's message I viewed as there's been some belief around the league is, oh, look, there's a fire sale going on in Indianapolis. Everything must go, basically. And again, going back to, I think, Tony, the start of this conversation is that was what he was trying to say. Hey, look, not at all. And maybe this is a little bit strategic, right? Because you throw out any leverage you have. If you say, hey, we're trading guys, come at them. We'll take best offer. So that's what I viewed in there. But at the same time, I think he would be crazy if he thinks no changes need to be made, even if this for the sake of the individual. There's several players, quite honestly, on this team I think are almost begging for just a fresh start, a fresh opportunity, and it might be best for the Pacers as well, right?
Well, and a lot of those players they're okay with the fresh opportunity being here, which I think is interesting. And one of those players has become very public in Turner. But yeah, I agree with you that it's strategic. And it's weird because I think a lot of the quotes read as like Herb Simon is going to maintain the status quo and they're going to be the same old Pacers. And I get why they read that way, but I also don't think that's what he was trying to say. Like he had a specific quote about like, yeah, like we will change stuff if we need to, and the season goes that way. Like that's why he was.
He got back to that at the very end, and I'm glad he did because you're right. The first one of the I think it was like the second question, maybe it was Greg that says, "So does this mean it's status quo?" And I didn't think that was at all what he was getting at, but that's how he answered at least early on. And but then he changed the course, and I think adequately expressed how he felt, and that considerations were absolutely on the table because they have to be.
But the problem for fans will always be, to me, again, that he had some answers that just disconnect with how they feel, including the biggest one, straight up asked, was it you? I don't remember. Herb, do you think this is a playoff team? And he said, definitely yes. He thinks this is a playoff team. And, we're all in the room like, you're 13th right now. No one said that, but, that was pretty surprising to me. And the little spark.
And then at least someone followed up and says, still? Because I would agree at the beginning of the season, I would have said the same thing. And in large part, nobody, even the front office, could have seen the brutal schedule. TJ Warren still not playing. When is he going to play? Certainly not this month. And all the other factors that I've gone to everything. So with all that said, I still would have said they're a playoff team. Just anymore, right now they're not playing like it. So absolutely not.
The little spark plug team line is already a meme in my mentions. It took a few hours for that to become the case.
The little spark club and something else little. I'm very proud of this little team.
Yeah.
I think that I was talking with someone. I think that's just kind of his vernacular. He's 87. It's probably it's probably in his lexicon.
So if I had to zoom out and do my takeaways, I've kept you 1 minute over how long I told you, Scott. Sorry. I would say that Herb is not going to rebuild. We knew that already, and he's making that very clear. But I also think he kind of said he understands that the franchise is not necessarily at its highest point right now, and changes might be coming if they're needed. That's how I would sum it up. But that's pretty high level for a long meeting like that.
Yeah, I don't agree with that last point that it's at a highest point or it's good or we're in,
not its highest point. Did I say highest point?
I mean, I've had to listen back to a lot of audio today, so maybe it's just me, right? Going a little bit crazy here, but yeah, how I thought he was overly optimistic is how I agree. I would put it, in some of which I understand, but also when talking to your fans directly for the first time in, let's say, a decade, because nobody knows for sure. In fact, past that, nobody's been on the beat, so we don't have. Like with a long-standing someone to point to here. But I thought he was too optimistic on some fronts where he needed to not only accept, but say, hey, fans, I hear you. I know where you're coming from, and that's on us. Not that there was any blame, but it almost felt like there needed to be some acceptance of we fell short. And the only time I could sense a little bit of that is when I asked about the draft. And it was great. He goes, yeah, I think we stubbed our toes.
Stubbed our toes.
Yeah, you might have had surgery a couple times. TJ Leaf's over in the Chinese Basketball Association.
I typed stubbed our toes in all caps in my notes. I thought I wanted to use that one in my story. That was my favorite line. Scott's already got a story about this. Scott, where can people find it and all your stuff in general? Most people already know, but still, floor's yours.
Yeah, as the graphic said, at Scott Agness on Twitter. Here we go, late night.
Wow.
Fieldhouse Files podcast, and subscribe at fieldhousefiles.com.
Must subscribe. That's where I get the information that I share to Scott, where he says in his story about Kevin Pritchard's contract extension. So if you haven't read his story and want to know more about that thing that I just said, that's where it is. Of course, this podcast at Locked On Pacers and me at TSTNBA. But stick around because I'm going to talk by myself about the Pacers-Bucks game that just happened. I don't even want to call it a game.
Why?
It was awful. Yeah, a fourth quarter to forget because this is a
Yikes.
show about basketball, damn it. I'm not going to skip the
Did
basketball.
not go well. Bucks, Trump, Pacers, yet again, period.
Yeah, it was the same as every Pacers-Bucks game for the last 3 years of my life.
I feel bad. I guarantee you, last thing, that there were some Pacer fans that thought this is my chance to make money. All the Bucks players are out. There is no chance they don't win. And they lost some money, and I feel bad for them. That's why Vegas is rich.
Horrible fourth quarter, and let's talk about it. Stick around for more. One more break so I can talk to you guys about the good people over at TrueBill, because did you know a lot of free trials renew without your consent? It's a business scam out to get you. Don't let greedy corporations pocket your money. Download TrueBill to take control of your subscriptions. TrueBill is the new app that helps you identify and stop paying for subscriptions you don't need, want, or simply forgot about. On average, people save up to $720 per year with TrueBill because companies make subscriptions hard to cancel. TrueBill makes it incredibly simple. Just link your accounts, and TrueBill will cancel your unwanted subscriptions in one tap. And your TrueBill concierge is there when you need them to cancel unwanted subscriptions, so you don't have to. They have saved over 2 million users. They have over 2 million users and have helped them save over $100 million. Don't fall for subscription scams. Start canceling today at TrueBill.com/LockedOnNBA. Go right now. TrueBill.com/LockedOnNBA can save you thousands a year. TrueBill.com/LockedOnNBA. Big thanks to Scott for his time. Now let's talk about the actual basketball game, unfortunately, from the Pacers' perspective, that took place last night. Pacers-Bucks in Milwaukee. And if you look at who's not playing for the Bucks, you would think that this game story tells itself, right? Milwaukee out before this game started. It was announced Giannis Antetokounmpo, DeMarcus Cousins, Dante DiVincenzo, Semi Ojeleye, Brook Lopez, and Wesley Matthews, and Chris Middleton all would not play. That team, that 7 guys I just named, would be a good team in the NBA. None of those guys played against the Pacers in this game. The Pacers had Justin Holiday back. They lost Torrey Craig for this one. He was out with a non-COVID illness. Goga's in the G League, but same team they had last week, basically, plus Justin Holiday. And they got absolutely smoked. 114-99 was the loss. Let's talk about this game. I forgot to say thank you for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and hopefully every day. Pacers were tied after one quarter, down 5 at halftime, tied going into the fourth quarter, right? So it seems like an overreaction to be really thumping on a 15-point loss. Obviously, all those guys being out makes it a bad loss by default. They had more talent than the Bucks team that was playing. Drew Holiday was unbelievably good for the Bucks. He was a plus 19. Like, he absolutely dominated. And Bobby Portis is good, and Connaughton and Grayson Allen can kind of do some stuff. But like, Jordan Nwora started for the Bucks, and their bench was two-way guys, and Rodney Hood and George Hill's okay, but like, they did not have a good enough team to beat what the Pacers had, and they thoroughly dominated this Pacers team. No one had it for the Pacers, right? In the first half, LeVert had, I think he had 16 at the break. I'm going to check my own tweets to see if I tweeted who was leading the way at halftime. But he finished with 16 points, right? LeVert had 16 at halftime and finished with 16. So he did not score in the second half. So his 16-point game is kind of marred by when he scored it. Sabonis finishes with 16 and 14. He was pretty good, but his defense was a little suspect, and he had 5 turnovers. Right, the Bucks were getting into the paint. No problem in this game. The point of attack defense was an absolute joke. The Bucks had 48 points in the paint with no one who could attack the lane extremely well. It was extremely easy for them to get into the paint and score over whoever was there. Miles Turner had 13 points on 5 for 12 shooting, 1 for 5 from deep. Did not assert himself in the way that he was last week. Duarte was 4 for 9 with 10 points. Brogdon was 4 for 10 with 12 points. So yeah, they had the balance. They were sharing the ball as a starting 5, and all of them were in double figures, but none of them were actually hitting shots that well. None of them were hitting threes hardly at all. And those 5 guys combined for 14 of the Pacers' 18 turnovers. So the Pacers starting 5, supposed to be their unit that can guide them to a win against a team missing a bunch of its players, was just atrocious in this game. Justin Holiday in his first game back only played 19 and a half minutes, 5 points, hit 1 3. What was just fine. O'Shea Brissett is like the only bench player who can provide any energy now with McConnell out. He was probably the Pacers' best player in this game, if I had to say. Brad Wanamaker had a nice stretch at one point in the first half. He actually had 5 points, 4 rebounds, 5 assists. He might have been the best bench player in this game, one of him and Brissett, but no one really played up to their level in this game. Keelan Martin shot the ball decently well. So some of the bench guys were at least okay, and those were the guys that ended up getting the Pacers to tie this game up at the end of the third, but the starters were just atrocious. They could not do anything in this game. And then in the fourth, the spirit of the Pacers was just gone. They scored 12 points in the fourth quarter. They gave up 27. This game was really close until about the 8-minute mark, I would say, in the fourth. It was 9:15 to go, and there was a technical foul, and then the Bucks just ran away from it for the final 8 minutes of this game. Yeah, 8:12 to go is when that tech happened. The Pacers were down by 1 point. It was 92-93 at that point. Pacers would score 7 points the rest of the way. The Bucks would score 21. So that was when the game really kind of changed, was that moment. Not to say the foul actually changed anything, but at that point, right, there were some subs. LeVert came in, Sabonis came in, and the starters, like I said, were not good in this game. So they just couldn't get it done. And on a day where Herb Simon is talking about really kind of not believing in the way that it's kind of been portrayed, but he has faith in this team. He thinks it can be a playoff team. He doesn't necessarily think a rebuild is needed at this time, per se. They come out and just stink it up, and no one looked good. And like, this game was weird because like the Pacers always lose to the Bucks, and some of it is, yes, Giannis and Chris are just the perfect kryptonites for the Pacers in general, and some of it is the way the Bucks play. And I thought that I was joking with Ty Windish, who hosts a Bucks podcast before this game, the Eurostep. I said, even with those guys out, I still kind of jokingly was like, no, the Bucks could still win. And he was like, no way. And the Bucks did win because there's some element of the way these teams match up that, yeah, the Bucks have some advantage. The Pacers still should have dominated. This is not, I'm not excusing the way they played. I'm just explaining that this matchup's pretty poor, and yet they still should have won. And they just had no spirit and fight in this game. But all that was to say that this was kind of unlike any Pacers performance I've seen this season. Like, I get some deja vu sometimes with some of their losses this year where, they have one stinky run in the second quarter and then it's a close game at the end and they lose close, or, they have a nice spirited win against a good team. But this one, this was like the most, and maybe it was just the fourth quarter, right? They were really tied after three quarters, which still, again, against this Bucks team that was playing, they should have been up after three quarters. But in general, it wasn't so bad until the fourth. But that was the most unrecognizable I've seen them all season, was that fourth quarter, I think. I mean, they weren't even like, they had no identity at all. We've heard that phrase a million times. They couldn't get the ball where it needed to go. And this is something they always talk about when they're struggling. And it's so fascinating to me when this kind of stuff happens. They always say, we don't get into the paint enough, right? They're just moving around the perimeter. They're not going inside out to get the better open shots, or they're not being as selective with their threes. And remember something I said about the Pacers that was helping them a lot during their winning streak last week was they were taking fewer threes. They were a little bit more selective with those shots. In this game, 38 threes, not as selective. They kind of went away from, and 38's not like so many. That's not even that bad, but they went away a little bit from what was making them hum. 54 points in the paint is still very good, but they couldn't get the assist numbers and have that inside-out sort of play that's been working for them so well. In that fourth quarter, they were kind of playing the way they should have through the first three quarters on offense. Fourth quarter, that just totally went away. And what makes that so weird to me as a viewer is, like, sometimes you can ask guys, like, why do they go away from it? And they know why they go away from it, and they fix it. Or, like, it happens every so often, whatever. It's happening all the time. All the time. They just go away from something that makes this Pacers team good, right? Getting into the paint, moving it around, having guys who, what is the 0.5 rule, as it's been coined so many times, dribble, shoot, pass really quickly on the catch and make the defense move around and then get advantageous positions. And that's how their guards can score. Sabonis can be brilliant and create with his screens or whatever he does with the ball. Or, Brogdon's been a lot better on drives this year. Like, they have ways that driving to the basket and getting into the paint is so successful for them. And then just for some reason, for extended stretches, and in this game it was the fourth quarter where they also stunk on defense, they just completely abandon it. And then after the game they go, oh, we went away from what we're good at. And it doesn't make sense why that happens all the time. How did they get away from it? Why can't they go back to it? What is the mental block for them that makes this such a common thing? It's baffling for a team that should be better than this, right? Every stat says they should be better than 12 and 18, but every result they have and loss in the game, you watch the game and you go, yep, they should have lost that game. They deserved it. So it's a very weird team. Being 12 and 18 is certainly not where they wanted to be. And you'll look back at the end of the season and say they lost to the Bucks in Milwaukee and not even think twice about this game, right? But in the moment right now, it looks awful. They lost to a Bucks team that had nobody. This is an opportunity for, the Pacers to catch up to their win total in theory, right? They're playing a team that is usually better than them, but shouldn't be on paper in this game, and they couldn't do it. They could not play Pacers basketball when the game mattered and get a win, which is sort of emblematic of their season, but it was also one of their least recognizable performances. And even on defense, somewhere where they've been at least manageably good this year and kind of getting back closer to their identity where they were a top 6 defense 2 seasons ago. Drew Holiday got into the paint whenever he wanted, just strolled on in. A couple dribbles, he was in the paint, right? And he could get to the ball to his teammates from there. He had 14 assists, right? He could score himself. He had 26 points. Bobby Portis was on cleanup duty a lot inside, 3 offensive rebounds plus some easy duck-ins. Pat Connaughton was wide open for threes on kickouts from his drives. Rodney Hood as well was open on mostly in the first quarter for Hood. But, that the Bucks have an identity and a way they like to play. And even without their stars, without the right guys, they kept doing it. They gave the ball to the best player on their team and said, get into the paint and make it happen. And they did it, and it worked. And the Pacers' point of attack defense was a joke all night. They started to double Drew late in this game. But they have to play the way that they know works for them the whole game. They can't go away from it. They can't lack that force on defense the whole game. They have to play the way that the Pacers are good at. And for some reason, they didn't do it in this game. And I feel like I'm beating the same talking points over and over, but when you lose 18 times in ways that are very familiar, right? This reminded me a lot of the Heat loss with no Bam and Jimmy, or the Nuggets loss with no Jokic, Murray, Porter. And some of that's like, yeah, they lost to an opposing team that was missing stars. Like, the parallels are obvious, but it's also the way it happens where they had the life sucked out of them, and they're not moving the ball with a purpose. They're just moving it because they're supposed to. It's like they're going through the motions. It's like they're completely on autopilot and not thinking about what they're doing or not making the other team react. They're just doing what they're supposed to do in a game. It's sort of soulless. It's very strange. They play the Pistons tonight, an opportunity to turn it around very quickly and make people forget. And after that Pistons game, they have 5 days off. Huge opportunity in the season. They've played the most games in the league, or like right up against the most games in the league. 5 days off, all at home. Huge opportunity for them to really get right. And if they can get a win and have a better vibe and mentality through that 5-game stretch. I hate that I say vibe on like every podcast now, by the way. If they can really nail out how the team is feeling mentally through that stretch, beating Detroit would be huge. It's a tough game on a back-to-back, but they should be better than the Pistons without Jeremy Grant. The Pistons beat the Pacers once. The Pacers should win this game, and they need to. I'll talk about it tomorrow. And again, these last couple weeks have been full of Pacers news and content, and I've had some awesome guests. Tomorrow's is also awesome, so I'll have one segment alone talking about the Pistons game, and then a fun one talking about the future of the Pacers. So thank you guys for listening, hearing more about what Herb Simon had to say and how the Pacers could not do anything to beat a Bucks team without their stars. If you need more information about the Pacers, at Locked On Pacers on Twitter for this podcast, at TEastNBA to communicate with me. Thank you guys a ton for listening. Hope you had a great day, and we will see you tomorrow.